Today's episode is presented by Team Poland. Team Poland is a one-stop shop offered by 6 Polish development institutions to unlock global potential of Polish companies and their international partners.
Dzień dobry. It's Thursday, June 25, and this is the Brussels Playbook podcast. The vibe in Brussels today is... Well, actually, I'm not in Brussels. I'm in Gdańsk at the annual Ukraine Recovery Conference, and the vibe here is definitely determined. Politicians, businesses, and international financial institutions, they're all gathered here today to work out how to rebuild Ukraine, and that's a project that's now estimated to cost more than €500 billion. Also on the pod, EU governments want to allow investors to include fossil fuel projects in investment funds claiming to promote the green transition. And the European Council is opening its doors to influencers, as long as they're not Eurosceptics. I'm Zoya Sheftalovich, and with me today is Sarah Wheaton, one of our policy editors. Hey, Sarah.
Hey, Zoya.
How's life over in Brussels? I got to tell you, I'm in Gdańsk, and I heard that it is so hot overnight in Brussels. I'm just glad that it's just sunny and beautiful and cool here.
Yeah, well, with that attitude, you should just stay there, Zoya, because we're all going to be so hot and bothered that you might want to just avoid it.
Well, don't mind if I do, frankly. It is not a shabby place to be. Sarah, I told you I'm in Gdańsk. It's the Ukraine Recovery Conference. That's a 2-day affair that kicks off today. And actually this morning we're going to see Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, Antonio Costa, the Council President, Donald Tusk, the Polish Prime Minister, and the Ukrainian Prime Minister speaking on stage this morning from 10 o'clock in the morning. And it's a really important conference in any case every year, but this year in particular, it's being hosted by Poland, which is one of Ukraine's biggest backers, if not the biggest backer of Ukraine in the war.
Well, wait, Zoya, I'm a little confused, though, because you just listed like this kind of list of bold-faced names, but I didn't hear of Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Where is the Ukrainian president?
Yeah, that's right. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who has come in the past and who was expected to come this year. He's not coming because of this spat between the Polish president, Karol Nawrocki, and Zelenskyy. It is over the fact that Zelenskyy has approved the naming of a Ukrainian military unit after the UPA, which is the group that during the Second World War fought against the Soviets and the Nazis, but also during that period was responsible for the killing of a lot of Polish people. And after Volodymyr Zelenskyy approved the naming of this military unit, now after him, the Polish president, Karol Nawrocki, has taken away Poland's highest order, the Order of the White Eagle, from Zelenskyy. So this spat has been brewing over the past few weeks and was hanging over this conference here today. And even, yesterday I was at various receptions and parties here, and it was the talk of the town. People are talking about the fact that this is happening and that this kind of casts a shadow over this event.
Well, Zoya, I mean, is this just kind of one of these things that, makes headlines in tabloids or in Politico, or is this becoming a distraction on the ground?
It's definitely something people are talking about. Yesterday, Sarah, I arrived a bit early. I've been speaking with Ukrainian and Polish MPs, folks who are heavily involved in this area. One Ukrainian MP told me on condition of anonymity, this is just stupid. And they all are sort of on the same page. Poland supports Ukraine. It's really important that Ukraine wins the war. They don't want to talk about this, but inevitably, this is the topic of discussion on the ground here. That's what I'm hearing. I mean, I was in a cafe yesterday, and just that's what everyone was talking about, Sarah.
Well, so there are, though, as I understand, efforts to talk about the actual recovery effort. And, as part of that, you had a chance to sit down yesterday with Poland's finance and economy minister, Andrzej Domański. What did he tell you?
He was telling me some super interesting things. Like, as far as the Poles are concerned, all systems go. It's all about making sure Ukraine wins this war, but it is also about making sure that investment happens and economic prosperity happens on the other side of this war. Let's hear some of what he had to say yesterday.
You were in Kyiv recently for a major Polish economic mission. You were there to talk about investment. And just a couple of days after you left, there was a major attack by the Russians on Kyiv. Can you take us to that visit? What did you see? And how is it possible to talk about reconstruction and recovery given the attacks are ongoing?
Yes, a couple of weeks ago, we visited Kiev, and it was a very fruitful visit as we met with not only Ukrainian administration, but also with Ukrainian business. We try to strengthen our business relations with Ukraine, as we strongly believe that the long-lasting stability must be rooted in economic interdependence, economic cooperation, even more than on some treaties. We are neighbors. The trade between our countries is going up 160% just in the last 6 years. So this cooperation is really improving. And I do hope that it will be like that in coming years. We are working hard to deliver.
Well, you say that, and I've got some stats here for our audience. The Ukrainian recovery is expected to cost around about $600 billion. And the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which is one of the largest investors in Ukraine, said that they're going to sign more than 500 million euro in new investments at this conference alone. The Polish government has said roughly 200 agreements have been prepared for signature here. Can you give us some insight into what sorts of agreements we're likely to see? What's the most exciting thing for you?
I will not tell you right now what those agreements will be. You need to wait a couple hours more. But with no doubt, those agreements will help strengthening the position of all parties in this process of Ukraine reconstruction.
Companies are being asked to invest in Ukraine at a time when those attacks are ongoing. So what needs to be in place in Ukraine? You talked about the conditions need to be right. Openness needs to exist. I mean, what are we talking about here? Insurance, state guarantees, better air defense.
Well, I'm responsible for Polish economy, and I'm very proud that Polish development institutions are already providing for Polish companies credits, guarantees, some kind of advisory, everything that's needed to expand in Ukrainian markets. Then, of course, to secure long-lasting GDP growth of Ukraine, there's still a lot of work to be done. Fighting with corruption, for sure, is number one. Building strong market institution, development of strong judiciary system.
You mentioned the defense dimension. This is the first URC where defense has been a key pillar of the conference. That was an innovation that Poland brought to the table. Can you explain a little bit about the thinking that went into that concept? Why are you doing this way?
Right now, with no doubt, security and development, economical development are really interlinked. It's really difficult to have GDP growth with no security. This is why Poland is spending 5% of our GDP, close to 50 billion euro a year, to make Polish army stronger and create a really safe place for foreign investments. And I believe this is exactly what Ukraine is to do. Of course, Ukraine is in a different situation, fighting with this brutal Russian aggression, and Poland is fully supporting our Ukrainian partners, but we would like to have more cooperation, for example, in defense industry. Ukraine has some advantages, lots of R&D, for example, in the drone sector, and we'd like to have Polish companies to have better cooperation with our Ukrainian partners in this field.
So it's really great to hear from Minister Nawrocki on something that's really kind of at the coalface here in Gdańsk, where they're talking about the money side of things. And that's really important for Ukraine as well. It's important for Ukrainians to feel like on the other end of this war, there is prosperity. Hey, Sarah, we know that burning fossil fuels is problematic for the planet, right?
I think that there's a scientific consensus on that point.
Would you be surprised to hear that if a company that's developing new oil and gas projects, if it also actually does green projects, it might qualify as being part of the green transition?
I mean, it's a bit counterintuitive, but after many years of covering the EU, it wouldn't be the first contradiction along these lines.
Well, we've got a story from our sustainability reporter, Marianne Groh, on green finance rules. And it's quite technical, but I really do encourage our listeners to read it, because this is like what the EU is sometimes. That's the frustration at the EU. You know, you've got these rules, you've got regulations, and you have loopholes. And this is a classic loophole story, Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, so on Wednesday, EU ambassadors met in Brussels and they approved a deal on how to update green financing rules. And so that's like, look, if you're a person who's saying, I want to invest my money, but make sure it's only in green or sustainable products. And so the EU is kind of setting these definitions. But in the deal, EU government said that a company that is building a new coal, oil, or gas project could still nonetheless manage to qualify to be included in a fund that says it promotes the green transition. And, the sort of what some are calling a loophole there that you refer to is that some of their money just has to be spent on green projects.
I mean, this sounds a bit like what an NGO might say is greenwashing. I mean, what do the co-legislators, as we call them, the Council, the Commission, and the Parliament say about that? I mean, what is the justification there?
Yeah, the Commission's idea there was to exclude companies completely from green transition funds if they're building new fossil fuel projects, because that doesn't align with the bloc's environmental goals. But in the end, these companies are like, look, we're energy companies. So we're investing in lots of different types of energy. And so some of that energy might be new green energy. But you know what? At the same time, there's still demand for new energy, or in some cases, country might be switching from coal to gas. So yeah, we need to keep investing in new gas projects as well.
Well, it's not yet a done deal, as I understand it. This is part of the discussions that you have between the Council, the Commission, and the Parliament. And this is what the governments want, EU governments want, not necessarily what the Commission and the Parliament wants. So they've still got some tough negotiations ahead before the new rules come into force.
So we'll have to see what happens.
Sarah, this is fun/scary for you and me both. Earlier this year, our colleague Murray Eccles reported that the European Council wants to invite social media influencers to cover the EU leaders' summits in Brussels. This is potentially taking me and you out of a job, but it turns out there's a caveat.
Yeah, there's a caveat. I mean, and I guess it sort of makes sense from a perspective if you're trying to create pro-EU propaganda.
That's a big woo! Sarah Wheaton's on fire, both physically and metaphorically.
I mean, look, I'm going to own that. I know that's a strong word, but we've gotten our hands on the guidance sent by the Council of the EU to member countries. And they're like, yeah, you can choose the people who get these special access to come to Brussels and see the summits play out. But there are rules that say things like the content creator cannot have published anything that goes against EU values. They can't be a politician or seeking political office, fair enough. They also say that the audience size must be significant in relation to the country's population and that they can't have a significant or longstanding commercial collaboration. The rationale is that this makes transparency to how they're getting paid. But I'm like, okay, so we need somebody who is a cheerleader for the EU and has amassed a big following of people.
But they're not allowed to say anything that the EU doesn't like.
Right. And they also can't be making any income off of this. So just pro-EU volunteers that a lot of people are really into. Good luck.
But Sarah, this makes me think, will the council get a little bit happy, a little bit comfortable with this sort of arrangement where they can kind of control the narrative and they don't have the same level of criticism that might come? Because you and I have to ask pretty uncomfortable questions sometimes. We have to kind of put our hand up and say, hey, this doesn't feel like a great idea. This feels kind of cynical, or this feels contradictory. This is kind of a way of getting mass messages out there without that filter of a journalist who's able to look at something and go, actually, this doesn't make any sense. Because it's not like these people are experts in EU affairs.
Yeah, I mean, this is the trade-off. The idea is that we journalists are not sufficiently, educating and making people enthusiastic about the EU. So they're going to find some people who do that professionally. And maybe propaganda is a strong word, but these are essentially, comms or, advertisers.
Well, I guess from that perspective, everyone's allowed to have some advertising. Folks out there, what do you think about this? Do you think it's a good idea to have these influencers? Maybe you think that they're going to be spreading the gospel about the EU. Is it a bad idea? Let us know. Please do send us a voice note or a text message. The link is in the show notes. All right, Sarah, before we go, what have we got coming up on the weekend or tomorrow?
We are going to also be continuing this discussion about Ukraine's recovery, not just its, the physical infrastructure recovery, but also the recovery of the people from the trauma that they have been suffering from a war that has now gone on for longer than World War I. And so we'll have David Miliband. He's now the head of the International Rescue Committee, a humanitarian aid organization. And he's a former UK foreign secretary, so we'll get him to weigh in a little tiny bit on what's going on there. And then we'll hear a lot more about the UK and its reset or not with the EU as Prime Minister Keir Starmer resigns. And that conversation will be with our frequent contributor, Anne McAlvoy.
Well, fantastic. I'm looking forward to listening to that one, Sarah. Well, folks, I am still in Gdańsk for the rest of the week, so you'll be hearing plenty more about that from me elsewhere. And please do like us, subscribe, send us a rating. Sarah, we are so close to 1,000. We've got like 800 something on Spotify. I would love it if we could crack the big 4 digits soon. So please do send us a rating.
We might almost have enough listeners to qualify as a special influencer by the council standards.
Well, one can only dream.
A message from Team Poland. As a partner of the Ukraine Recovery Conference 2026 in Gdańsk, we thank all strategic thinkers for inspiring economic dialogue. Team Poland brings together 6 development institutions, connecting companies and investors to unlock ideas and capital and drive sustainable growth across Europe. Find us at www.teampoland.eu.